Greetings, it is time for our monthly update about inflation and whether we are in fact in a phase of unusually high inflation or not, and more importantly, whether the connection between technological deflation and quantitative easing is still current or not. Now, if you're looking at the mainstream media right now, you see inflation being mentioned virtually everywhere. They would have you believe that we are currently in a phase of extreme hyperinflation that is going to impoverish everyone, and everyone is getting poorer by the day. And I'm here to tell you that nothing could be further from the truth. Remember that the media is in the business of making you either angry or frightened. The economics of the news media are around the incentive structure of making you anxious, frightened, angry, and a whole bunch of other negative emotions. They make a lot less money when they make you feel good. That's why inflation is an extremely useful tool for the media, because they like to scare people about how inflation is making them poorer and poorer and they have to pay more and more for everything, yet their income is somehow not rising, and that is also not true. In reality, deflation is far worse for most people than inflation, as I describe in this video up here that you can see in the upper right-hand corner. But as you also may recall, I have created a metric of what defines truly structural inflation versus just short-term noise level data. The metric that I use to measure inflation is this 3% condition that I describe in this video up here that you can see on the right hand side of the screen. And if you refer to that video, you'll see that I require that the 10-year compound annual growth rate of the US CPI to be 3%, and the 10-year compound annual growth rate of the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index also has to be 3%. Unless both of these are true at the same time, we do not have a structural inflation problem. All these people claiming that we have extremely high inflation are very easily debunked. One of the worst purveyors of this, at least on YouTube, is this Economics Explained channel, which I debunk in this video up here that you can see on the right-hand side in that tag. He claims that we are already in hyperinflation, and he made that video almost a year ago. Now, the definition of hyperinflation is 50% inflation per month for a sustained number of months. 50% per month, not even per year, per month. And that channel keeps doubling down on this hyperinflation narrative because he doesn't really know anything about economics. He probably has a degree in economics from a university, which by definition means he knows nothing about economics, because what is taught in universities has absolutely nothing to do with the new economics of technology. It may have had something to do with 1950s era economics. So onto our metric over here. The inflation threshold of the CPI has to be 3%, so we go to that first. So for that reason, we go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. So here we are at the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, and we go to Consumer Price Index like we do for every month. And to select the data that we properly want to see, we go to more formatting options, and I choose 2-month, 3-month, 6-month, and 12-month percentage change among all of these. So this is the 1-month change, and you can see it's already plateauing and flattening out. This is at a higher level than before, but it's not rising further. So the second derivative has already been erased a long time ago. But this is very noisy because this is the 1-month data. So the 2-month data, slightly less noisy, also coming down and plateauing. 3-month data has also not been able to rise beyond its initial bump up here. And the 6-month data is over here, plateauing again like all of the other ones. So only the 1 year-over-year data is what you see in the headline news, which still seems to be rising, but the internals of that are weakening because even at the 6 months level, this is not increasing very much. So what is the 10-year compound annual growth rate? So to calculate the 10-year compound annual growth rate of the CPI like we do every month, we follow the same process. Take the most recent reading, which is around 280, and take the one from 10 years prior exactly, which is 227. This is exactly 10 years ago, so the growth rate between the two is what we measure and then what we divide into an annualized compound number. So 280 divided by 227 equals 1.233. That means there has been 23.3% inflation over 10 years. Now what is it over 1 year? So you take the 10th root of this, 0.1, 1.0212, and what you do here is you subtract 1 from this and then multiply it by 100 to get the percentage amount, 2.12. So 2.1% compound annual growth rate of inflation over the last 10 years. That is about 0.1% higher than it was a couple months ago, but still nowhere near 3%. So 2.1% is the compound annual growth rate of the US CPI over the last 10 years. And most of the months that have a higher reading are already behind us based on what we saw from the second derivative just a few minutes ago. And I guarantee for that same reason that by April, May, June at the latest, you will see this number moderate back down, and all the people who are screaming about the CPI being at a 40-year high and all the very cherry-picked and very super selective statements that they make that give you no context about the actual trend lines or anything will all completely vanish. So 2.1%. Now, remember, the US CPI is a metric of only the United States, of only one country, and the United States does just 25% of the world's quantitative easing. The other 75% is not done by the United States. So this whole narrative of how the US Federal Reserve prints money, therefore a commodity like gold will go up, a commodity that is priced worldwide, is just so incredibly ignorant that I'm surprised how so many otherwise intelligent people, such as Peter Schiff, who I debunk over here, is just completely repeating something that is illogical even in its opening glance. Therefore, what we look at as the true worldwide metric is commodities, so we go over there. This is the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index, which includes oil, gold, copper, natural gas, and everything else that you would consider as a commodity. At the top over here, you can choose its 10-year growth rate. Now, remember, its 1-year growth rate may seem extremely high, 36%. But what is special about that starting point? We are looking at the 10-year growth rate. And the 10-year growth rate is still minus 0.99%. It is in deflation. It has been in deflation for a long time, but the 10-year annual growth rate is not even growth at all. It is 1% a year of deflation. And the commodity index is the most accurate because that is the purest measure of inflation, in that commodities do not have a labor component. They're the ingredients of everything else. They're priced worldwide. People who say that the US CPI is rigged somehow or is underreporting the real inflation for some reason are completely nullified and rebutted by use of the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index, because these are the prices of commodities that are actually traded, and they're traded worldwide. The price of oil is a worldwide commodity if used under Brent oil. Gold is priced worldwide. So many of these other commodities are priced worldwide, and therefore this is the most unriggable index and the purest indicator of whether we actually have structural inflation or not. Now, services are not included in the commodity index, but services are in a gray area of whether they comprise of the pernicious type of inflation or not, because service price increases are simultaneous with wage increases as well, whereas commodity price increases are indisputably a cost to all consumers. So minus 0.99%. So much for hyperinflation. This is not even inflation at all. It is deflation. So this takes us back to our 3% comparison table. So the US CPI 10-year compound annual growth rate and the Goldman Sachs 10-year compounded annual growth rate. And therefore, what we have just seen is that as of today, January 13th, 2022, use the US date convention, but hopefully everyone can figure out this is what I'm referring to. January 13, 2022, the US CPI is at 2.1% compound annual growth rate. It has edged up a little bit, but still nowhere near 3%. And the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index is still in deflation. Only when both of these numbers are crossed at the same time will I say that, yes, there is a structural inflation problem. If only one of them is crossed and the other is not, even that does not qualify. Both have to be crossed at the same time for reasons I described in that video that I had the card for. And we are still nowhere close to this. The US CPI has edged up a little bit, but as I said, it's going to edge back down very shortly, especially since the Federal Reserve has already started its tapering program, which affects the US because it's a US only CPI index. So this is what the story is about inflation, and this is the most recent monthly report. Tune out all the garbage that you see in the media about how inflation is making everyone poorer and how one particular product rose so much in price, therefore we are living in hyperinflation. All these PhD economists are super theoretical people, and when they say that quantitative easing causes inflation, there's just so many things wrong with that in terms of assuming that one country is the whole world, as well as how one product category represents all products, because they always cherry pick the one that rose and ignore the ones that didn't rise. And they foster a culture of ignorance and hearsay where just because their mode of thinking is that, hey, my wife's boyfriend's parole officer heard that the price of something rose, therefore there must be hyperinflation. They're trying to foist that type of very loserish mindset onto other people, and you should resist that, because these are the last people you should ever be listening to. They're hyper theoretical and have no connection to the real world in any sense, and don't even know anything about their purported primary field. So that is where we are in terms of the state of inflationary pressure, or lack thereof, as we're just seeing, and how technological deflation, which is rising exponentially, continues to hack away at the price of not just commodities, but also services to a lesser extent. And I'm going to have a future video at some point about the hierarchy of inflation purity, how commodity prices are the purest measure of inflation, service prices are an imperfect measure of inflation because service price inflation also increases wages as well, and therefore while some people are losing from service price inflation, some people are not. But that's why we take both of these metrics, a US CPI and a Goldman Sachs commodity index. If there were a worldwide CPI metric, that would be the better one to use than the US CPI metric, but there isn't one that is as widely used, so we use the Goldman Sachs commodity index as the ultimate worldwide indicator, particularly because commodities are the purest indicator of inflation or lack thereof. Anyway, I hope you found this monthly update to be informative and that you learned a fair amount simply by listening to this video as well as all the other videos in the tile. And if you like this type of content, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Thank you very much for watching.